All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started then. Can everyone hear me fine? Leslie, good to go?
I am. Thank you.
All right, great. Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the March Brunch and Learn. Today we have Alexander Superintendent Leslie Bieber with us presenting on safety and security in rural schools. Leslie serves as the superintendent of the Alexander School District, a role she has had for 11 years. The district, located in the Northwest, has experienced an impressive enrollment growth of 182% during her tenure. With a decade of dedication to studying safety and security in educational environments, Leslie has been instrumental in implementing industry best practices. So, not surprisingly, but well deserving, Leslie was North Dakota Superintendent of the Year in 2022 and continues to do great things. Outside of her professional life, she is a devoted mother to three and grandmother to four. And congratulations, Leslie, eagerly expecting the arrival of her fifth grandchild. So, as usual, I'll be moderating the questions in as we go, and we'll hand it over now to Leslie.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. I am going to ask for some grace from all of you as I muddle my way through sharing my screens and flipping between different areas. So let me start this slideshow. How's that? And we'll just start talking. Please let me know when you have questions. I believe Taylor's going to monitor the chat, so or just unmute and break in. So I guess I'll start with safety and security and how I even got started with it. And it was from another superintendent at a meeting who said, you know, it's going to happen in this active threat. A situation will happen in the state of North Dakota. And as you all look around at one another across the table, you're feeling bad that you're praying it's not your school that it happens in. As you're looking at the other superintendents, because you don't want it to happen there either. But unfortunately, it is today's predominant concern, which I'll get into later. So first and foremost, we'll start with first responders. Who are the first responders of a rural school? And the answer is staff and students. So for Alexander, we are 45 minutes from our closest law enforcement. How far is your law enforcement? And some of it may be in town. We're pretty rural. We're right in between. We're actually 24 miles, I believe, from Williston, or I should say Watford, and 26 miles from Williston. So we're right in the middle. We are a part of McKenzie County, however, and our sheriff's department then is, but their station is 40 plus miles away. So you just never know. And I will tell you that we've had two scares here in Alexander where we've had to call and ask for help. And the first response was 3 minutes. The second response was close to 40. So in that time of chaos and an active threat and fear, we are the first responders. Fire safety was once the predominant concern, and the last death in fire the last death in school due to fire was in 1958. And then what happened was they started educating. They started running drills now in North Dakota Century Code. They started building their facilities to, I mean, you can't have a door that isn't in my office that isn't fire safe. And everyone knows what to do in a fire, no matter where they're at. They can be in Walmart, in a grocery store, and people know what to do in fire, which you would think would be just common knowledge, but it is to us now because of that education. It wasn't before. So today's predominant concern is active threat, unfortunately, but that is what we're facing. And education, as with anything else in this world, education is the key to safety, my opinion. So we use ALICE as our protocol. And I don't really, the question you have to ask yourself, especially if you're a board member, what is your protocol? What's your plan? How often do you practice it? As a board member, do you know what it is and why? Are you able to explain it to a community member? Not necessarily exactly what you do, because a lot of that is private, but what it is. And so for ours, I'm just going to go through ALICE. I've been trained in ALICE now for about 7 years. I'm a trainer myself. I don't prefer to, but I can do it, and I'm trained to do it, and I continue to re-up that training We do it every year. It's a part of our professional development in our back to school days. And then we have Alice drill days marked into our planning calendar. So our staff knows ahead of time what days we're going to do, not exactly what it is. With Alice, it's alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. And I'm just going to kind of go through all of it just to give you a gist and then show you some of the other features that we've set up in our buildings and some of the software that we use. The nice thing about Alice is you don't do it, there's no right order. It's all based on the reaction. And for a human being, you have, in a time of chaos, you have about 10 seconds. I think it's a little bit longer, and I apologize, but I want to say you have about 10 seconds before your ears, your hearing actually goes down, and so does your vision, starts to blur. That's why when people get excited, they have a tendency to speak louder because that's that panic coming out. Your audio does lessen. So you have just so long, and it's seconds, to react before the brain starts to shut down a little bit just out of fear. So that practice is so important of knowing exactly, so you really don't need that brain to help you. But so you need to react to the situation that you're in and the place that you're in. We start with a book, especially with our littles. We're not scared, we're prepared. And it's something that the kids go through. My teachers start in the first week, they start reading it. And then it doesn't make it so much as a monster, but more of an empowerment of, I know what to do if I'm in a situation. And again, that the goal of education of Alice education is, no matter where you're at, let's go back to Walmart or the grocery store, you know what to do. So we train our substitute teachers. This I have not been great at to date. This year we really learned. Our alarm went off, and I had a sub. Actually, she was just volunteer, but she is a sub teacher working at our book fair, and she didn't know what to do. She was smart enough to at least hide behind a curtain on the stage, but didn't know what to do. Then she was worried about the money. So then she got out and got the money, and it wasn't up to her it was our lack of training that we didn't do. So this next year, I have all of my subs will be invited back to the professional development on that first day when we come back, and they will be a part of this Alice training. And then we had a full-blown training for subs on a different day. So it's extremely important to include your law enforcement. For us, our fire department, our ambulance. One of my crisis team members is our city hall auditor. So she knows what we're doing. She knows what our plan is. She's our person that goes to our evacuation site and makes sure that it's unlocked. And it's not that we have to call her. I'll later tell you that, in case you're wondering, how would she know? But when we built our crisis plan and when we drill, whether it's a small drill or a larger drill, we have all of those entities within our town, a very small town, working with us. And then, of course, sitting down and working through what didn't work, and I told you about those few scares that we had. We learned a lot. And again, I'll come to them a little bit later, but so we train and drill with students. Safety is first, and then communication. That's a really big thing, because in today's world, even though we have a no cell phone policy, I mean, we know those kids that still have it on them, or they have the watches where they can call as long as the phone is, and their first thing is to communicate. That's one of the first things they want to do, communicate with parents. So it's extremely important to teach them safety first. Once you're safe, then you can reach out. We train the parents. And again, this is something that we were really good on when we first started. And as I was writing this, I thought, oof, I need to bring this back up. Train parents to what is expected of them. I always say people often apologize when they get upset and emotional, maybe use words that they wouldn't normally use in a setting, and then apologize for them getting exciting. But my job is to spend people's money and take care of their babies. two of the most precious things that are linked to our emotions. So that's just expected. And when you see cop cars outside of the school, we have to train parents. Don't start calling the school. We need those lines open. Don't come to the school. Don't put on Facebook, hey, what's happening at the school? There's 8 cop cars. That just causes chaos. So, of course, you're always going to have those that still do. But it's important to train them of what is our expectation of them to keep their kids safe. In one of our scares where we had, I don't know, I'm going to say at least a dozen cop cars, all with their lights on, randomly just pulling up. We had an officer with I can't think of the big gun, but a big rifle and in full suit standing outside the door. And we had a parent want to just walk in to pick up their kid for the day. So it's extremely important that they know what they're doing. And they need to know that their expectation, when they don't follow the protocol of their expectation, they're taking away from the first responders who are caring for their children. And then, of course, our staff. So, doesn't want to flip to the next. There it is. Okay, so alert. We have panic buttons throughout the building, which have been a little bit of a problem. They've gone off. Our first scare was our panic button going off because they were doing something outside. It scared us. It did not call. We are linked to, we pay, I think it's $300 a year. And then if that panic alarm goes off, they call 911 and let them know. Well, it didn't because it wasn't actually fully set off. So it was up to us to call 911, which is always important. Don't ever rely on anything else. And so it has caused problems because it wasn't a real, but we learned a lot from it. But we do have them throughout the building, and then it's linked to our security system. And so if the panic button goes off throughout the entire building, and I'm going to be loud for a minute, it says, there is an active threat in the building. Use active threat protocol. And I mean, it just repeats and it repeats and it repeats. And it is loud. And so it's important that kids, especially littles, hear that ahead of time so they know what it is. So we do set off the actual alarm. Of course, we train prior to, and in the first few times we let them know, hey, kiddos, this is a drill. We're going to go through it, and this is the purpose. After our first big scare, one of the things that we really learned is our inability to communicate with everyone in the building. And so we were able to go out and find, and here's where I'm going to stop the share and go out, Navigate Prepared. This has been a great system. It's not overly expensive. I want to say it costs about $2,500 a year. So I'm going to set off an alarm, just a training, so you can see exactly what it is and what we do. So it takes you to, because now we're one district, one building, but of course one district may have different buildings. So that's why it first takes you to the building that you want. So I'm going to make sure to go to training. If I don't go to training and go to drill or alarm, our crisis team, everyone on our crisis team, which involves our first responders, about definitely our sheriff, our school resource officer, I would say we have a dozen other deputies on this who are considered admin. And so their phones go off, and then every staff member. I don't require that staff members do it, that have it on their phone, because we don't pay for their phone, but we do ask, and I have yet to have somebody turn me down. So you can put it off for fire, an intruder, weather, medical, missing student. This is one we have used before. Thankfully, the student had just gone behind the building where some of the teachers couldn't see him out in the recess. He was a special needs student, and he thought it was funny to hide. So we'll go with an intruder emergency. And when I hit activate, then every phone goes off. So you can hear it throughout the building. And so when we practice this drill, you can hear their phones going off. And so this is what, now this is me as an administrator, this is what I see. Teachers who are not administrators, other staff members who are not administrators don't see all of this, but they at least see their class. People who don't have class can have an option to go find a student, and I'll explain all of it for. So if you watch this first part here where it says not accounted for, 326 and accounted for. So I'm going to hit OK, change status. Oh, excuse me. OK, where's submit? Of course, it's not going to work now that I'm. Oh, here it is. Under teaching staff, 1 is checked in. So I'm about 3 screens down where it says 27. 1 is checked in. That's me. So here are some kids, and I'm going to say these are the kids that I happen to have. Now, this little young lady isn't there, and you can see then I can click on her twice and she turns yellow. This kiddo is injured his toe, but as I check them in, where's my submit now? Save modified, there we go. My status changes so that once they're safe, once they do follow the protocol and once they're safe, this automatically accounts for who's injured. There's a chat session where we can go out and chat either with all staff, anybody who has it, or just admin. So just a certain number of people then will see certain communication, but otherwise it's an instant chat between all of us. I can set this alarm off. Anybody who has this, so any staff member can set this alarm off. So if, like I said, somebody used it for a missing student out on the recess, a staff member just did it, so we were all alarmed, let's get out there. So there's all kinds of different, of course, threats that we want to look at. So this is one of the greatest features that Navigate 360 has. The other thing it has, these are our flip charts. And so this is something we all deal with. An angry parent. What do you do with an angry parent? An active threat, a bus accident. And let me see if it'll let me click into it because I'm in the admin screen. No, it's not going to. But it's a quick flip chart of anything that they need to go to, and this is all on their phone. This is how we're going to react. Now, of course, not everybody, parents don't have access to this, of course. But the next part is that it has as a reunification, and I unfortunately cannot do a training in Activate reunification, so I will not show you exactly what it looks like. But no matter where we're at, then we have at our reunification site, which is off campus, even a phone. I can activate a reunification. So when a student comes, I'm instantly checking them out as parents are picking them up. And that's our quick response of, okay, who's still here, who isn't. So any questions on Navigate 360 at this point? I guess I should ask before I move on.
Leslie, is the training that you're talking about specifically for Navigate 365, or is it threat assessment training in general?
Oh, so we do both. Good question. We do both. We train them on exactly how to use this, how to set an alarm off. Okay, so that's here. No schools were found in here, of course, because one's underneath, because we're in this. But we do the Alice training includes how to react in an active threat, but we train on all of it. If that makes sense.
Yep. And then what does it take to become certified, I guess, then in the Alice training?
In the Alice training, you actually sign up for it. So they do hold trainings, train the trainer around the state on a regular basis. I should say regular. I know in the Northwest, I usually have access about once a year. I was trained in Bowman, excuse me. So the Southwest, they had a training not too long ago in Williston at another school. So you just call Alice, you contact them and let them know you would like something, and then they'll send a trainer. And then they charge so much per number of participants.
Okay, great. Well, I'll be sure to make sure that I put this in our resources and on the Brunch and Learn page so that everyone kind of has access to Alice information and whatnot.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. So let me go back here. I'm sure there was a way to save it that I don't know about. Okay. So alert is yelling out, informing anyone that's coming in, a school active threat alarm like we have, as I stated. And now there are cameras actually with resume slideshow. There it is. There are actually cameras with AI. So the artificial intelligence will detect a weapon and then alarm someone. I know it was called Zero Safety or Zero something. There was a zero in it. And I did price it out. It's extremely pricey, but they have somebody at the desk 24/7 where they alarm them, and then they have certain, like in my admin stream, they would alarm us and say, hey, there's been a, a weapon detected here, whatever. It takes less than 7 seconds for them then to call 911 or to set alarms off within the building. And it has past active threats have shown that from the time that the weapon was taken out to the first actual incident with another person is 15 seconds. So it saves you about that 8 seconds. But again, it was extremely expensive. I like it. I just don't know how to afford it just yet. So, we continue to look at different things, but as artificial intelligence comes in, I believe that will be just like our fire doors or all the different things that we have for fire. I believe that'll be a part of stopping those weapons. And then one of the biggest things, my daughter is a CPA, and during tax season, I've asked her, what are you going to do if somebody comes in as an active threat? And her first reaction was, hide, get under my desk. Okay, wrong answer. Absolute wrong answer. So it's important. One of the things to remember as I'm continuing to go through is this is important to take out into the workforce, because although we hear about the school threats and about the unfortunate school incidents that occur, active threats actually occur 56% more in businesses than they do in any kind of education setting. So alert is the A for the Alice, lockdown is the L for Alice. And, lockdown, actually, the concept of locking down came from what we used to do and what happened and what we've seen in, let's say, that initial Columbine is get under your desk and hide, actually came from Los Angeles school district. And the reason they would get down and underneath is because underneath the windows was cement. And so then you needed to get under something because the reason they started it was shootings, drive-by shootings. So then the glass that would come out, if you got underneath a desk, then you were protected from the shattering glass. So that was the first concept of really the lockdown. And that's really why we went to hide and shelter yourself. But unfortunately, in an active threat, you're a sitting duck. So locking down today is very different than everybody hide and get under something. And so we have a night lockdown, and even my preschool kids, with practice, they're 4 years old, they can do it. And I do have a video to show you in the next screen that I will show you exactly what that is. And I'll say it again, but they're $60. So, and when you buy them in bulk, like we did, they were 40 some dollars. They're excellent. And then you build a barricade. So in my office, I would push my table and start putting my chairs on it and building a barricade. So not only do I have a night lock on my door, but then I have a barricade which will detour them or give them more time, because by the time someone is there, their mindset to come in and do an active threat, they're not wanting to mess with. Their goal is to injure as many people as they can. And when they can't get into a place, they're not going to spend that time trying to. So, and I'll show it again at the bottom of this slide, I happen to have Virginia Tech, and I'll show you what a lockdown did for them. We cover our windows, of course. You remain in place. That's the concept of a lockdown. You spread out. So we don't want all of them in one area. You spread the kids out, which can be scary. And then arming yourself. And one of the things that we teach our kid is this is just a small little cell phone. But if I pitch this at your head, I can do some damage. So, I mean, even if it's a water bottle, throw something. No matter what, you're going to deflect, which gives you time. The other thing we do is we have fire extinguishers in every classroom. And although we have a fire suppression system in the majority of our classes at this point, the purpose of the fire extinguisher is actually to take out a perpetrator, not to, we did have Raid wasp spray, but unfortunately you can be sued because you can cause them to go blind. So we went with a fire extinguisher. We teach the kids how to use a fire extinguisher, and that it's okay to spray them. You want to aim for the face and then hit them. And of course, we don't teach preschoolers that, but we do teach them to throw things in there. And again, when you start from a process of education of we're not scared, we're prepared, it's more empowering to kids, even the littles, than it is scary. We have a glass break tool in every windowsill in case the kids need to have a clean break and get out. And then we have emergency bags and buckets in every classroom. We don't have buckets in the classrooms that have bathrooms, so you know the purpose of the bucket. But in the emergency bag, then, we've got people in fear. So we have those little, I want to call them go to the moon blankets, those are little emergency blankets that are all wrapped up into one little packet for everybody. Again, in case for those shots. We have things like, of course, first aid things. We have, unfortunately, and our teachers know it, and we're very blessed to have a school nurse part-time in a small school. She goes through the training, and of course our school resource officer goes through the training of, in our emergency bags, we even have tampons and for bullet holes to put them in a wound. So our emergency bag holds sanitizers that you put in a bucket in case somebody does have to use it for the bathroom while they're in there, because it's not just during the threat. That's a short time, but the reunification part and the release by law enforcement, that can take hours. So we try and keep some food in there, and then we have these little water things where it's just one little drink, but it's something. So we have a variety of things in our emergency bags. If someone evacuates, which is next, we do not ask that they take them. It is just for a lockdown. So, and we continue to build things in there, especially or add things into the bag, especially when we talk to other schools and some of the other ideas they have. So if you ever come up with a great idea of, hey, this should be an emergency bag, please, I welcome you to reach out. I have classroom differences and reactions and fatality, and that's on a different screen. So I'm going to take you to this video of our night lockdown. And again, I'm going to say this was $40-some for every classroom. Oh, that didn't work. There is an active threat in the building. There is an active threat in the building. Use active threat protocol. Okay, so it's as simple as this little tool right in the door. And again, even 4-year-olds can do it. And they cannot get in. Now, there's a little hook that only I and my principals have that you can slide under a door to get it out in case you have kids that want to try and lock themselves in, barricade themselves in, out of being ornery. Virginia Tech. So this is the layout of Virginia Tech with the hallway. One unfortunately was killed in the hallway, but kind of what happened in these different classrooms. So I'm going to start up here on the top, room 206. And unfortunately, 10 were killed and 2 were wounded. They're in room 204, they jumped out of the window, and the professor used himself as a barricade to the to the door while his kids were jumping. Now, unfortunately, the professor was killed. So he's one of the two fatalities there. Three were wounded, with two of them breaking their legs jumping out of the window. Just a side note, that professor had actually survived Auschwitz and then unfortunately died in a gunshot wound. But he was protecting his kids. Let's go to the bottom part. I'm going to jump over to 211, where they did nothing. 12 were killed and 6 were wounded. So the two that barricaded in had less. The room 205 actually barricaded like I recommended, where you put things up to the door, and he could not get in. So, and I apologize, it was 207. 207 is where the professor barricaded themselves in, not 204. In 204, they all just jumped. But a couple of them didn't make it. It was 207 where the professor barricaded himself and then went. So anyway, so this just shows that barricading themselves actually makes a difference. That lockdown in, they're not there to, and then of course the perpetrator killed himself. But and that's how it ended. That's how the active threat ended, because he had, if I don't know if you know anything about Virginia Tech, but he had actually chained the doors on both sides of the hallway so that emergency response couldn't get in. So anyway, this is just a show that it does. This is part of the proof that it does work in one of the most recent nightmares that occurred recently. I for Alice is inform and counter, or excuse me, I is inform. And of course, that's calling 911, others coming into the building. More detail, the better. So if you do evacuate, which is the E of Alice, you want to tell others who are coming. You don't want to stop and run back. If you want to yell and holler and jump, but they do train, don't stop and holler back. And then of course, we let other people know, don't rely on others to call 911. Don't rely on the navigate system to call 911. Call as many as you can. And that 911 call is very scary, and but they are very good. They are very good. In my 911 call, when we didn't know what was happening and our alarm went off, I think back to how well trained that person was, as every time I became extremely heightened. And that was the first time, and it took 3 minutes for someone to arrive. And I think twice I, in a very heightened, probably high-pitched voice, began to panic. I don't know what's happening to my kids. Where are people? Why are you asking me where my school is? We're in a small town. I mean, and they would just bring me back down. So continuing that 911, inform, inform, inform. Counter, we do teach our kids to counter. It's the last resort that you want to use, but you do need to attack if necessary. And of course, if there's more than one, you're better off. But what happens to that child who's stuck in the bathroom and they can hear them coming? Don't just shut the stall door and hope they go away, because they're not going to. We have automated flushers now. So even if you climb up on the chair, that's a lot of things what are on the toilet seat. A lot of our kids will be like, I'll just climb up on the toilet seat. They can't see my legs. And if you move even an inch, that automated flusher is going to go off. So it's important to teach them how to counter. We actually teach them how, as a team, to take a big person down. Throw whatever you have. Again, we have those fire extinguishers. If you're in the bathroom, you have a garbage can. You can break a mirror. Now you have a knife too. But even throwing a garbage can and running, zigzagging, the chances of those shots hitting you are much slimmer. So it's such an ugly subject to talk about when we talk about our kids and that they're in school, and this should not be a part of their education. But today it is a part of their education. And if you make it where you don't speak about it, it makes it more scary versus empowerment. That's a big word for our kiddos. So evacuating, we have a prearranged route. So our first responders know what roads we're using to evacuate based on the side of the building that you're at, so that they use the other roads coming up, because you don't want first responders, and I mean, they're human too. And a lot of my deputies, I have kids of deputies and police, so, and ambulance and fire department, and they're all coming. They're not necessarily going to be looking for all these kids who are scattering. So we train our kids to evacuate in one way using only certain roads, only cross the main road to get to our evacuation site at one area. And again, you lose your ability to think sensibly in that panic mode. So that training is important, that brain memory. And then reunification. Off campus, we have a member, like I said, we have a member to unlock the area. We have supplies for students and staff. Our area does not have enough toilet paper, so even down to the toilet paper. It does not have enough toilet paper in their bathrooms for 400 people by the time we're all there. And for how long? Hours, more than likely, because law enforcement will not release until they have everybody accounted for and they know what's happening. Part of law enforcement goes directly to our reunification area just to help with the panic mode, not only of our staff and students, but of our parents who just want their kids. And so when Johnny Smith comes to pick up Susie Smith, and my front office aren't the people there, and it's maybe someone else who stepped in, and they say, I need your license, please. Johnny's going to lose it, because all he wants to know is that his kids are okay. So it's important to have that law enforcement. And again, it's important to continually remind your parents what their portion of all of this is. We use Navigate 360. I showed you to reunificate, so it's instant, which helps with the speed. We have a food and water plan. So I have someone who is not outside of our district, but who lives out of town. They're on our crisis team, and when they get the call, I have a deal with happens to be called Wild Bison. I don't think it's called that anymore. It's our convenience store, a little bit out of town, where when that person comes, they give us food and they give us water. And I don't care if it's just granola bars. They give us something and water. And then, of course, my sheriff's department will be in sync, knowing, okay, these are the people that are coming, and they're the ones that can come in. Even though they're parents, they can come in, but they're coming with the food and water for our plan. We have bins of games and rosters just in case nobody has. I mean, you don't think to grab your phone. Hopefully, we train the kids, don't go back for your phone. And then, of course, first aid down there where our reunification is. So law enforcement and first responders, extremely important to do everything in sync. Our active threat scare, our very that first time, Border Patrol was the one that came, and they were here in less than 3 minutes. He does not know my building. I had to leave my office with my fire extinguisher, but I had to leave my office to go and just let him in, because of course he can get into the front doors, but he can't get into the second set. And so he's standing in the vestibule, and I didn't know what kind of danger I was putting myself in, but I knew we just needed law enforcement in. So Watford City Police Department, they don't know my building. McKenzie County Sheriff's Department does know my building, and Highway Patrol, since our first scare, comes in, I don't want to say regularly, but we know to bring them in, especially when there's newbies. They come in and tour the building. We gave dispatch access to our cameras so that they can be in these officers' ears, telling them exactly what's happened and where it's at. We have lock boxes outside with a master key, and they all have the code. And again, dispatch has that code. So even if the individual deputy may not have it, their dispatch is in their ear and they have it. They all have our crisis team contact information again, and then access to our safety plans and routes. So they're part of our Navigate 360. And then I'm going to go under school maps. I have it. Our school resource officer Also with me, takes safety and security very serious. And so she put together binders of all the county schools that she oversees. She's a county school resource officer, so that dispatch has everything right there in a binder and it isn't trying to look at two different screens or whatever. But the other things we do, and it might be on my next one, so I don't want to, why don't I go? There we go. I openly allow law enforcement to use our school for drills. Please. We give a discount to our fitness center. We give them a lunch price discount so that they come. It's important that our kiddos don't just see our school resource officer, but other deputies as well. And Alexander's very well known for quality lunches. We have a full salad bar and a full fruit bar, and they really like it. We have an office that the deputies can use 24/7. They have access to it. There's a coffee machine in there. There's a refrigerator, there's a small dorm refrigerator in there. The most important thing is that there's presence, so that you never know when there will be a car out here. You'll never know when there'll be law enforcement on site. And that's probably the biggest deterrent for anyone, is no matter what, 24/7, we have their presence, because we do not have law enforcement in the town of Alexander. Although the city does contract with them, but in our crisis handbook, we have other emergencies such as suicide, death of a student, a bus accident, what to do when. We have a crisis team and manual, and of course, all of this is on Navigate 360. What to say to staff, what to mail out to the public. Alexander did have a tragedy. Gosh, it's been about 7 years now. And I and another principal were in Bismarck, and we got the phone call at 1 o'clock in the morning that 3 of our students had died in a vehicle accident. We needed to be prepared for our kids and for our staff by 7 a.m. in the morning. And so having that all drilled out, you're gonna alter it for every situation, but knowing exactly what to do and having something to go to in hand is great for everyone on the crisis team, including myself, and my board members, because of course they're one of the first phone calls in any kind of crisis. Medical codes. We have medical codes in place. I'm sure you guys have severe allergies as well. We have epilepsy. We have, all kinds of things. So we train how to use an EpiPen. But we have a medical team in place, and then we have coverage so if Mrs. Smith, if we have a code blue over the intercom, Mrs. Smith knows she needs to go because she's an EMT. Well, then we'll just use Mr. Smith. These aren't real people, of course. Know that he has to cover their class. She can't wait to say, oh, where's Mr. Smith? Or, hey, you guys go to, they just know what to do. I can't tell you exactly how they do it, but they know what to do and they practice it, and their kids know what to do. Our crisis team included a member from parents, board members, ambulance, emergency management, fire department, law enforcement. We all came together. Of course, it's a 200+ page document, and it took us a while and about 8 meetings to get through it. And it's time to do it again, but you really have to have their input for everything. So I'm sure if there's board members out there, you're just like my board members. You just love policies. So mental health of students and staff, that's also in our crisis team, and it's important to talk about the impact of trauma. We teach see something, say something. It's a deterrent of any damage. And then one of the things I really want to talk about is staff trauma. We have a tendency to focus on what our kids are going through, and we forget that all of the talking about this and all of the training and having to deal with the mental health of some of our students, not just in a traumatic situation, but day to day, also takes a toll on staff. And so you really need to have things in place and remember, and a lot of times it's just talking, but for us, we go with the village, and it's an emergency employment assistance program. And that employment assistance programs offers 4 free sessions per household member. So if you have 4 people living in your household, that's 16 sessions. Each one can take 4 or just one can take 16. And it can be, it's telehealth, one-on-one with a counselor, or you have a free attorney one-to-one meeting, or financial planning, or dieting planning. So dietitian. So they have a plethora of counselors on different topics, and it costs $1,500 a year. So we have 58 employees, and every employee is covered under that $1,500. So the mental health of staff is extremely important, as well as kiddos.
Leslie, is that number a baseline? Like say it went over 200, would there be an upcharge of that cost?
Yes. Yep. It's
Okay.
based on your size, right? So
Okay.
for a rural school, it's very doable. And that's how they keep it. And then what we do in a rural area is we also use the village, and we pay so much, it's quite a bit more. I believe our cost is $6,000 a year. I think it was 12,000 the first year. And that's based on, but then our students have a mental health counselor, and again, it's telehealth. Um, but they go in and weekly, and I mean, if they have insurance, then they go through and that's less costs on the school, but um, it really gives access to everybody. So there's an employment for the village, and then there's students, and we use both of them. So we've had great success.
Okay. Thank you.
So because it's North Dakota School Board Association, what's your school board role? Well, with anything else, your policy development. I wanted to, and I just threw it in somewhere, make sure that you assign a spokesperson. That's in our crisis handbook, so that you're not all saying different things. So for example, I'm the spokesperson, and then we have unfortunately, if I'm not available after an active threat, who else is in line? And different ideas of how to handle and what to say as a spokesperson, because media will be all over it. Budget allocation. We have done everything that we've done in our building. I want to, except for the school resource officer, of course, that's a continual of about $35,000 a year. Our commissioners support, our county commissioners support a portion of it as well. But we share with 5 other schools. We're the largest school that of the 4 other. So there's 4, and we're the largest of the 4, excuse me. And so we have her the majority of the time. She's here about 15 to 20 hours a week. So she makes a strong presence. And $35,000 is well worth it. But the investment in everything else, and the training, and all the other things that come with it, the fire extinguishers, the night locks, the Navigate 360, it's a very small percentage of our budget. It's a one-time purchase here, it's a one-time purchase there, but I've been blessed to have boards that take safety and security as a priority along with me. Listening, as I said at the beginning of this, listening to that superintendent say, it will happen in North Dakota. Are you prepared? Just hit me. I don't want that to be, I want to be prepared, and I want to give my kids and my staff the best chance they have in any kind of situation. So you as a board, then facilities management, training and education. And again, I'm going to say again, it's important that you know what your school is doing and why. You may not have to know what to do in the moment, but you need to know what they're doing and why. What's the purpose behind it? Ask those questions. And then, of course, open communication with your superintendents and your staff members and your constituents. And again, I'm going to say, because we all know constituents don't necessarily just follow protocol and go to the superintendent for questions. You're usually their first phone call sometimes, right? So, all right. Any other questions out there?
Leslie, with all of the information that you have gathered, that you put into then the resource kind of research, what was your first steps then in, I guess, enacting kind of these plans, these implementations?
My first step really was for me and it was my high school principal at the time. We went to the train the trainer for the Alice protocol. That was our very first step. And then I learned so much in that, and then just researching and then putting together a crisis team. That was um, my second real big step of having everybody's input, what should go in that emergency bag, and then discussing it with staff. I wouldn't have, I'm a Spanish teacher, right? Secondary level. So I didn't think, hey, what are you going to do with those littles for those hours during the reunification process? Let's make sure we have color sheets and games. And it really just takes everybody together to go through everything and think through all those steps of what needs to be in place. And then, of course, informing my board along the way. Buying the night locks one year and then the next year the fire extinguishers, and just kind of putting it out there as a more in a process than anything else.
Well, great, thank you. Like I said before, we'll get those resources up
Yep.
online so that people kind of get started on what they may want to do if they don't already have something in place.
All right.
So, all
Well, thank you
right.
for
Well,
asking.
yes, of course. Any other questions, anyone? Probably will have questions later on too. So we're going to put your information on our website with the Brunch and Learn materials, if that's all right.
Perfect. Okay.
Great. All
Thank you.
right. Well, thank you,
Have
everyone.
a
And
great day,
thank you,
everybody.
Leslie.
Oh, you're very welcome. Bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.